Hello and welcome to D-Dubs Plays. As a gamer and content creator on YouTube, I know that you're here because you share a passion for gaming. We love to play. And today we have the incredible opportunity to connect with people from all corners of the globe. Through in-game chat, Discord servers and social media, we build friendships that transcend borders. Our gaming community is wonderfully diverse. In the United States, 46% of gamers identify as female, 25% come from non-white ethnic backgrounds, and 11% identify as LGBTQ+. Yet these aspects of our identities aren't what define our friendships. We bond over our shared experiences, discussing quests we're tracking, sharing our favourite games, and recounting what we did outside of gaming. Because of this camaraderie, I believe most of us want our friends to feel included and represented in our beloved hobby, just as we do. However, there is a growing concern that certain agenda-driven groups within games development are pushing inclusivity in ways that may alienate audiences. Many developers are focusing on creating generic games that fail to resonate with us, often tacking on insincere diversity elements. This can lead to a negative perception among gamers. Additionally, some games journalists seem hesitant to critique anything labelled as inclusive, while quick to label critics as bigoted. This dynamic suggests that, in their efforts to promote inclusivity, the industry may inadvertently be harming the very cause they aim to support. Now, I want to explore these missteps in more detail, but first, let's look at some examples of games that have successfully implemented diversity. There are many games that have been inclusive and representative in ways that feel authentic rather than forced. Titles like Life is Strange, The Last of Us Part 2, and Baldur's Gate 3 stand out. Other games such as Bioshock Infinite and The Witcher 3 use compelling narratives to tackle themes of racism and discrimination that resonate with us as players. Games like these not only enhance inclusivity and representation for marginalised groups, but they also help normalise diversity in gaming for all of us. So what's the trick? How have they managed to do this without stirring up the controversy that surrounds so many recent titles attempting to be inclusive? The answer is that these games have all been, first and foremost, great experiences. The Witcher 3, for instance, is considered by many to be among the greatest games of all time. They understand what we, as the gaming audience, want from our experiences. We're looking for immersive gameplay, engaging storylines, and compelling characters, and these titles have all been praised for delivering exactly that. Gameplay should be a given. It's the fundamental foundation that every game needs to get right if it wants to be viewed positively by our community. When it comes to stories, we don't mind if they tackle complex or controversial themes, as long as they're well written and engaging. Likewise, if a character is presented with real depth, we aren't going to take issue with their race, gender, or sexuality. Ultimately, we just want great games. Worlds we can get lost in together. When a studio can deliver that, adding diversity only enriches our experience and makes the game more interesting. Unfortunately, we're in a time when many studios seem unable to deliver the experiences we crave. As those who watched my previous rant will know, I discussed the shortcomings of many AAA games, and if you missed that, I will include the link in the description. Now, in that video, I briefly touched on today's topic, and I want to clarify that my reluctance to engage in the politics surrounding these titles wasn't about avoiding controversy. Instead, I believe the real issue runs deeper than just identity politics or virtue signalling. I stand by that perspective, and I'll delve into some of those issues a bit later. Since that video, however, I've noticed an increasing presence of identity politics in my feeds. Now, our community, like any other, has its dark, toxic corners where trolls lurk. The games industry, though often reluctant to admit it, also has its share of these dark spaces. While we should never feed the trolls, too many people have engaged, getting pulled into a debate that's grown increasingly toxic. It's become a divide, gamers versus the industry, with identity politics serving as the battle cry. And I felt compelled to add a more nuanced voice to this conversation. Now, a lot of what I've seen in my feeds was sparked by the revelation that Sweet Baby Inc. has significantly stripped back their website, removing much of the information that was previously available, including their client list. Some view this move as sinister, questioning what they might be trying to hide. But to me, it just seems like damage control. They've been navigating a tough situation for a while, and as a business, it's understandable. By eliminating anything that could inflame their most vocal critics and shielding their clients from potential backlash, they're acting in their own business interests. In the corporate world, the motive is always money. Some of you might be wondering who Sweet Baby Inc. is and why they've been weathering the storm, so let me provide a brief overview. They are a narrative consultancy company with a mission to tell better stories while diversifying and enriching the video games industry. They also aim to make games more engaging, more fun, more meaningful, and more inclusive for everyone. It's worth noting that they are not the only narrative consultancy company that has been embroiled in the debate, but they are likely the most well known. The controversy surrounding Sweet Baby Inc. began when an employee, Chris Kindred, targeted a Steam curator group called Sweet Baby Inc. Detected. Kindred took to X to call for people to report the account and get it banned from Steam. As a result, X suspended his account for 6 days due to violations of their targeted harassment rules. And thanks to the Streisand effect, the Steam group gained significant attention. This incident prompted scrutiny of Sweet Baby Inc. and several other comments surfaced that further shaped the community's perception of them. CEO Kim Belair, speaking at the 2019 Game Developers Conference, stated, "If you're a creative working in AAA, put this stuff up to your higher-ups, and if they don't see the value of what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't." Old posts from employee Felix Kramer surfaced saying things like, "Pay me to shoot down your white male lead game ideas," and "had a nightmare that I was a white male gamer." Former employee Danny Lalondes openly admitted to not hiring white people, while current employer Cameron Wild recently presented a slide during the Game Devs of Colour Expo titled, "Cool, so why am I here?" One of the bullet points on that slide was burning the games industry to the ground. All of this added fuel to the fire, and for many, Sweet Baby Inc. became emblematic of everything that's wrong with the industry. Accusations began to circulate that they were ruining the games they worked on by forcing their ideology into them, and this notion has gained considerable traction. Now, some of the rhetoric I've discussed does paint a troubling picture of attitudes within the company, but we, as the gaming community, can't pretend our own rhetoric is free of toxicity. As I mentioned, both sides have those dark corners. But what about the claim that Sweet Baby Inc. is destroying games? There are a few reasons why I don't think that's a fair assessment. First, it misunderstands the role of a narrative consultant. Studios bring in these companies when they have a character or a story, wanting to ensure authenticity and avoid stereotypes. Sweet Baby isn't imposing representation into games. The developers choose to include diverse characters and then hire consultants to ensure they're portrayed accurately. Second, it implies that every game associated with Sweet Baby is subpar, which isn't accurate. Sure, there have been some mixed reviews, but looking at their games on Steam, that's only about a quarter of them. Half have very positive ratings and the rest are mostly positive. There's just one game, Unknown 9 Awakening, with mostly negative reviews. IGN even gave it a 5, which seems surprising. I mean, doesn't their scale usually start at 7? Jokes aside, the ratio seems pretty solid, especially in an era where so many games end up disappointing players. Finally, as I've mentioned before, the issues with many of these games go far beyond just identity politics, and it's time to dig deeper into that. In my last rant, I highlighted some of these issues, but I didn't really explore the reasons behind them, so let me share my thoughts on that. The cost of producing a AAA title has skyrocketed in recent years, often reaching hundreds of millions of dollars for each new release. To put that into perspective, if a game is priced at $50 and costs $100 million to develop, it needs to sell 2 million copies just to break even, and that's not taking into account things like store costs and taxes. AAA games have turned into massive financial risks, and studios understandably want to minimise that risk. A lot of the problems we see in today's games stem from how studios approach this challenge. Sometimes they'll prioritise spectacle, creating vast game worlds that lack meaningful content. They might introduce monetization strategies, which can lead to mechanics designed to boost those features rather than enhancing the player experience. Often, they try to appeal to the widest audience possible, sanitizing narratives to the point where they become generic and fail to engage anyone. It's often a combination of all of these factors and more. To us as consumers, it seemed clear the best way to reduce risk is to focus on delivering great games that prioritize player experience. But corporations tend to think differently. There are also structural issues at play. Long chains of command can slow down decision making and stifle creativity, Plus, we've been hearing a lot about cultures of toxic positivity in many studios, which can discourage developers from voicing concerns when they see poor ideas being pushed forward. As these issues have intensified within the industry, public attitudes have also evolved significantly. The rise of awareness around diversity and inclusion has been fueled by movements like Me Too and Black Lives Matter. These conversations have permeated public discourse, prompting developers to make a more concerted effort to incorporate inclusive elements into their games. Whether this stems from a genuine commitment to the issues or a desire to capitalise on a shifting public sentiment is beside the point. What we see are two distinct trends that have converged, creating the illusion of a direct connection. However, when studios attempt to integrate inclusive elements into poorly designed games in a way that feels forced and disingenuous, they risk alienating their audience, further entrenching the perception that these two phenomena are inherently linked. There's a growing discontent with the industry, and it is justified. However, the deeper issues at the root of this discontent are often masked by the association with identity politics. The situation is further exacerbated by the erosion of trust between gamers and the media. Many players feel that review scores no longer accurately reflect the quality of the games being evaluated, particularly when political motivations seem to influence the critique. For instance, well-made games like Hogwarts Legacy have received low scores such as a 1 out of 10 from Wired due to perceived ideological misalignment. On the other hand, poorly designed games often receive favourable reviews, seemingly for ticking the right boxes, as seen with CG Mag's 4 out of 5 for Forspoken and Game Rant's 8 out of 10 for Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. While many outlets do provide scores that align more closely with gamer opinions, these discrepancies only serve to deepen the prevailing distrust. Moreover, games journalism often frames the debate as a confrontation between the industry and gamers, creating an us versus them mentality. The Gamergate controversy serves as a prime example of this dynamic, where the media depicted the situation as a struggle between a progressive gaming industry advocating for diversity and a segment of the gaming community resistant to change. This oversimplified narrative not only misrepresents the complexities of the gaming community, but also alienates those who support inclusivity while feeling marginalised by extreme portrayals. As a result, the conversation around diversity and representation in gaming becomes fraught with tension, further complicating the relationship between journalists, developers, and players. Building on that, many gamers are expressing a nuanced perspective that often gets overlooked in the broader discourse. They're not part of the anti-woke crowd, rather, they're ordinary players who are frustrated by the learned association between identity politics and poor game quality. These gamers emphasise that it's not the presence of the diversity that bothers them, but rather the perception that developers prioritise inclusivity over gameplay quality. They've encountered several recent titles that, despite their political messaging, have failed to deliver engaging and well-crafted experiences. This frustration is compounded by the feeling that their valid criticisms are unfairly lumped together with the more toxic elements of the community. When they raise concerns about gameplay mechanics or narrative depth, they often find themselves branded as dissenters simply because they dare to question the effectiveness of the inclusivity efforts. This creates a paradox where players recognise that the politics of a game do not inherently cause it to be bad, yet they feel trapped in a narrative that paints them as anti-woke for expressing their dissatisfaction. The result is a chilling effect on open dialogue, leaving many gamers feeling unheard and marginalised in a conversation that should be inclusive of all viewpoints. I started by pointing out examples of fantastic games that successfully embrace diversity and inclusivity. When we're immersed in a game, it doesn't matter whether we're playing as a straight white man, a gay black woman, or a blue-skinned creature with tentacle hair. If the story is engaging, we welcome themes of social justice. The issue arises when the game fails to captivate us and the narratives fall flat. In Forspoken, the protagonist is a black woman, and on paper her character has potential. The game also explores themes of self-discovery and empowerment, which could have been compelling. Unfortunately, the story feels like a typical and cliched fantasy narrative. The reluctant hero lacks charm, and her talking armband is equally unlikable. Moreover, the open world feels lifeless, and the gameplay quickly becomes repetitive. The overall experience is so bland and generic that the wasted potential of these inclusive elements becomes glaringly apparent, leading some to feel that these aspects were the sole focus of the effort. Star Wars Outlaws is sold poorly because it lacks engaging gameplay, with some interesting mechanics overshadowed by frustrating elements. The protagonist, Kves, seems to draw inspiration from Han Solo, but falls short in capturing his charm and charisma. While K's racially ambiguous identity may not have been the focus, Ubisoft's handling of inclusivity in Assassin's Creed Shadows drew attention to these aspects. In Shadows, Ubisoft's implementation of a black protagonist in feudal Japan with a hip-hop theme sparked controversy for its lack of cultural sensitivity. To make matters worse, they failed to do justice to the historical and cultural aspects of Japan, resulting in significant backlash from the Japanese community. Many are expecting Shadows to be a disappointing game, but that isn't because of Ubisoft's ham-fisted and disingenuous attempt at inclusivity. It's because they now have a track record for not delivering high-quality games. We've come to feel that they only know how to make one game, a sprawling open-world checklist exercise that we've all played a dozen times already. The current landscape of inclusivity in gaming often feels disingenuous, especially when poorly executed attempts at representation leave gamers feeling skeptical rather than embraced. As certain groups push for inclusivity, their methods can alienate rather than unite, creating a backlash against the very ideology they seek to promote. This skepticism is further fueled by a recent influx of subpar games, where studios, in an effort to reduce financial risk amid soaring development costs, have prioritised marketability over genuine creativity. Coupled with a media narrative that frames the discussion as a moral battleground, it's no wonder that many gamers perceive inclusive elements as forced or insincere. This context helps explain why the gaming community's wariness of inclusivity is not just a reactionary stance, but rather a response to a complex interplay of factors that warrants understanding. To foster a healthier gaming environment, we need to calm the rhetoric and prioritise the creation of quality games. The industry must learn to ignore the trolls and maintain a consistent message centred on inclusiveness, rather than dismissing every critique as anti-woke bile. By listening to valid concerns and engaging in open, honest dialogue, we can move past the current divisive climate and work together towards common goals. When developers focus on making compelling and engaging games, they naturally gain the freedom to incorporate inclusivity in ways that resonate with players. Change is inevitable. Social norms are shifting, and we see growing diversity in gaming much like in film and television. While some big studios struggle, others that are in tune with what gamers truly want are thriving and successfully producing inclusive titles. Ultimately, everyone, whether they identify as woke or anti-woke or anything in between, everyone desires better games. If we shift our focus from a moral battleground to collaboration and creativity, the transition towards inclusivity will be smoother and more rewarding for everyone. But this was a tricky subject to tackle, but it's an important one nonetheless. I hope I've managed to convey my thoughts with the sensitivity that this topic deserves. Most importantly, I hope my take was thought-provoking and encourages you to dig beneath the knee-jerk reactions to really think about these issues. Did I give you a new perspective? Let me know down in the comments, and feel free to hit the like and subscribe buttons whilst you're down there. Thanks for joining me, and I will catch you in the next one.